Hey, welcome to the Extra Podcast. My name is Daniel Market. I'm joined around the table by Andy Steiger.
Good to be with you, Daniel.
Of the Human Project.
And I'm even wearing the t-shirt.
And Jeff Bucknam.
Hi, I don't have a Human Project t-shirt.
Jeff Bucknam, sponsored by Jif Peanut Butter.
I got some Jif peanut butter here today, yes.
I saw you were holding those in the kitchen. Now you brought them down here. Is there any length you wouldn't go to have Jif Peanut Butter, Jeff?
You know, as peanut butters go, I would say that Jif is probably the best.
Okay, so you heard it here first on the podcast.
I can respect that.
You have to, but some people like the non-sugared peanut butter, though. And so if you like the non-sugared peanut butter, you'll think that what I just said, it was horrible. But I'm telling you that after living in several countries, experiencing many different peanut butters, the Jif is probably up there.
Oh, Jeff,
used to be a Skippy man.
Mm-hmm.
But I have converted.
But what you're saying is now that you're cultured, now that you've seen the world, and you can tell everyone that you've lived in New Zealand.
I prefer the term woke. Now that I'm woke, it's Jeff for me.
You know, it just sounds terrible when you say that. It just sounds so bad when you say that.
Andy, the Apologetics Canada conference happened this last weekend.
It did. I'm in the process of gaining some of my sanity back.
Well, Andy, maybe to help you with your sanity, I got here for you a red, not fortune cookie, but prophecy cookie. Why don't you open that up?
Would you like me to open
that? Are they
that?
actually prophecy cookies?
I think so.
Mine's broken. Oh, what does that mean?
I don't know, Jeff. You should interpret that, maybe.
Shouldn't be good. Wouldn't be good. Okay, I'm kind of concerned by a red fortune cookie, to be honest with you.
Are they fortune or are they called prophecy cookies?
They are.
Do people actually make prophecy cookies?
I have no idea.
Is that a thing?
What does it say, Andy?
It says that I won $2 off any box
at Wokebox.
At crackacookie.com.
Oh, so you got these from Walkbox.
Or Wokebox. What does yours say, Jeff?
Mine says sharing Walkbox equals good karma. That's great. That's great that you brought that onto the Christian podcast from the church that you work at. That's excellent.
Yeah, so mine doesn't have a fortune other than I get $2 off because I'm awesome.
That's better, man. That's even better than Jeff's.
That's like a roll up the rim thing.
Yours says, improve chopstick skills, get more Walkbox. Or, as Jeff likes to say, Wokebox.
Daniel had all week to prepare the opening to this podcast, and that's, ladies and gentlemen, is what he came up with. So
I'm disappointed in
Jeff,
my future.
It's great to have you back.
It's great to be back. I haven't been here for a little while.
I know. Why do you always leave us?
It's not because I always leave you. It's that I have been.
You're too good for the podcast? You're too good for the radio?
I'm a pretty important guy. So I got things to do.
He's got a sermon coming up on humility. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah,
exactly.
He's got...
Take me for an example.
Yeah.
Right?
The sermon's going to be woke. Andy, back to the... speaking of woke...
Yeah, let's
your
go back
conference,
there.
buddy.
Yeah.
Look at that conference. Tell us about it.
It was fantastic. We had over 1,400 people in attendance.
Come on.
Yeah, which was just awesome. For some people who don't know, it's more than just a conference. Starting that week, we on Wednesday we were at Westside with around 800 people out for a dialogue with
Westside. What is Westside?
Westside Church in Vancouver, and it was a fantastic dialogue that we had with Ian Bushfield, who is the head of the BC Humanist Association, and Andy Bannister, and talking on the foundation of human rights. And then we did the same thing on the Friday night out at the conference with Justin Trottier, and again, a fantastic dialogue. I'll say this. Well, actually, I'll get to that in a moment. One of the things that we also did during that week is on the Friday morning, we were at Abbotsford Christian School, and we did a mini conference at their school.
What does that mean?
Where they actually just kind of turned their school into a conference for the afternoon, and they used classrooms as breakout sessions and whatnot. And that was fantastic as well. We also did a pastor's lunch that took place on the Friday. So it was just a busy week. And then after the conference, we were out at, we had one of our speakers out at the Village Church, and then we had one of our speakers out at Broadway. And so those events went fantastic as well.
Great. And so I heard from a lot of people that this was a great conference. Mm-hmm. I was there, and I thought it was great, although I didn't get to listen to a ton of the stuff because I was running around bidding whatever you'd have me do, Andy.
That's what we do.
One of the highlights that I heard,
or doing whatever he bid you.
yes,
But you could bid too. You could bid it whatever.
basically the speaker who stood out, I think, to a lot of people, one of the most enjoyable things was, I think, the humanist discussion. And so could you define for us, can we just talk a little bit about what humanism is? Because this is a topic I hear thrown around a lot, and I think it's important for our listeners and the world to know what humanism is. Yeah,
let's start by first making it clear that there's a distinction with regards to humanism. A lot of people tend to associate humanism with secular humanism. And notice you need to preface that, right? Because a lot of people would argue, and I would be one of those, is that Christianity is the original humanist association, if you will. That Christianity...
Sorry. If I will. I will, Andy.
Thank you, and I did. You're going to edit that one out. What? Did that come across pompous? Or?
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. This idea, though, that Christianity lifts up humanity is a good thing, like that humans are important. So we
actually, can I make a comment about that?
Hey, Jeff, you should make a comment right now.
No, I'm just going to interject. That's actually, no matter what the debates are about Genesis 1 and 2, or let's just say Genesis 1, there's lots of debates about how old the earth is and how like what order, like all this stuff. All the stuff. Is a day 24 hours or not? The main thrust in Genesis 1 is that that God is a great creator who made the world, and his final act of creation prior to resting was making people who have a distinctive that nothing else has.
And I would argue that everything in creation was leading up
absolutely
to that point.
That it's the final
a pinnacle.
Yeah, it's the final moment, which of course in the ancient world was not the way they looked at it.
Yep.
They thought people were the servants of the gods. And so the idea that you would write a creation narrative that talks about people being God's like final climaxing act, and he places his image in them in a way that nothing else reflects him, is actually, it's earth-shattering, and it's unique in all of religious history. So yes.
And this is the height of humanism,
right?
Is that God made you in his image. And so if you think about that, that means that the greater your view of God, the greater your view of humanity. And Christianity is an incredibly humanizing faith in that Christianity has a high view of God. So if we have a high view of God, we have a high view of humanity. Mm-hmm. And this is significant.
In terms of their inherent worth. And one of the challenges, of course, in modern theology is that people sometimes emphasize the idea that people are made in the image of God, and they don't understand that they are also fallen. But so both of those are true in the modern world. But so what you find in people's, yes, made in the image of God, that doesn't mean, and they therefore have inherent worth, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't change at all. Because unfortunately, they're also fallen image bearers of Christ, and so are fallen image bearers of God. And so as a result, we as Christians, we say, you have inherent dignity, and worth should always be treated with respect and the kind of dignity that is due somebody made in the image of God. And yet at the same time, we call you to repent so that you can actually be a complete human in the sense that what you were made to be, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would just put a caveat on that too, or maybe just tease that out a little bit, because when I hear Christians talk about this sometimes, and I'll throw myself in this as well, we tend to use language that isn't quite accurate. And I've been guilty of this, where I'll say, the image of God is broken in humanity. And we have got to be careful with that, because no, the image of God isn't broken in you. You are fully made in the image of God. You're broken. God's not broken. You're broken. And we are marring that image. And like what you're saying, Jeff, where we're not fully reflecting that. Mm-hmm. And so through Jesus, we are fully human in him, in that we're able to live out the purpose we were created for through Christ.
But secular humanism.
Yeah, I was just going to lead into that now. So secular humanism then is a humanism devoid of the God component of that human value. And so you see, one of the things that I appreciate about humanists or secular humanists is this desire to value human beings. So there's this idea to lift up humanity, and in many sense, that idea is that you take God out of the equation, because in many ways we become the God in that worldview, that humanity is the pinnacle in a sense. The question though becomes where or why does humanity have this value that, as for example on the Friday night, Justin Trottier would be quite happy with saying that humanity has inherent dignity or value, as we find in the Declaration of Human Rights. The big question underlining that, though, is, why is that the case?
And what's his answer to that? What is the answer? I'm not saying forget about Justin Trottier. I'm asking in general, Andy, because you've done the Human Project and you're interacting with these ideas a lot. Can you tell us what is the common response of a secular humanist to that question? Like, where do you get the belief or the grounding, the authority to say that people people have inherent worth?
In my conversations with secular humanists, I find that two answers, I hear two answers the most. One answer that I hear a lot as of recent, it would be simply to say that it's just the case. It's just the case that humans have
properly basic.
Yeah, it's a properly basic. It's just that it just is, Jeff.
We just all naturally believe it.
Yeah, that more than that, just that you have inherent value that is objective because it just is. And what you find is, and this is kind of the overarching theme of all of them, there really isn't any explanation given as to why that is the case. It's just posited.
Before you give this second one, can I ask, just in the spirit of dialogue, though, and of course you're not a secular humanist here, but in the spirit of dialogue with secular humanism, the question I have is it properly basic? Because I'm just thinking cultures around the world where actually human beings are not treated, depending on who you are. So I'm thinking about Indian caste system, for example, that there are some people who are treated worse than a bull or a cow.
And slavery has been with humanity from the very beginning.
Right.
And so we see examples of people getting it wrong, and that's why people love to use Nazi Germany, because Nazi Germany
passed. Test case almost of everything. If your worldview can't address some of that,
because they passed laws that made it legal to kill Jews, and so that's why they tend to be an example. Is look, it was legal to do this, yet these Nazis were held accountable for following German law. Yeah. And so then it was posited, and that was the terminology actually used in the Nuremberg trials, that there's a law above the law, what's called a suprapositive.
Yeah. So the humanists would say, though, the secular humanists, that higher law, it just is.
It just is.
It just is.
Now, here's where I was actually talking to Justin Trottier behind, in the green room about this. And
behind the scenes, if
you will. And there's a conversation that even came out during the Q&A, is you have to start to tease out the worldview to see the inconsistency in the worldview. So I'm thankful that they see human as having dignity. The problem is it's inconsistent with their worldview.
It's just how do you get there?
Yeah, exactly. In particular, because secular humanism is based on a purely naturalistic, materialistic, physical worldview of just particles in motion. And so you have to ask yourself...
And evolutionary biology, which is the accepted thing. Which
and by the way, that's the second answer.
Which of course is a problem, because ultimately what you're saying is that there are species and even people who are more evolved than others. So this is what happened.
Which is eugenics.
When you ended up having social Darwinism back in the years, that was essentially the argument of social Darwinism was that, look, there are some cultures that are more evolved than other cultures, and the more evolved cultures take precedent, right, even in a moral sense,
that was
over
Aristotle's.
Others.
That was Aristotle's argument for slavery. He argued that there are some people that need to have a master that properly directs them because they can't direct themselves.
Right, and this is my point, I think, with the Indian caste system, which reflects some of that thinking too, which is that if you're an untouchable because of your background and because of even their religion, that your karma, we don't want to rob you of the karma that is coming to you because you were a jerk in a previous life or something to that effect. And so we don't believe that people are necessarily inherently worthy.
And that's a good point, Jeff, as well, when you look at the way that females have been viewed throughout history and children. that have been viewed throughout history.
They're chattel.
And Christianity was very unique in this way. Genesis 1:27 makes it very clear that both men and women have been made in the image of God. That is an equality that does not come in degrees, nor can it be taken away, which is important because in the Declaration for Human Rights, three things are posited. One is that humanity has inherent dignity. That means dignity that no one bestowed upon you. You were born with it. That's what it means to have inherent dignity. You came into the world with this. The second one is equality, and the third is inalienable rights, which means rights that can't be taken away from you. So again, you have to ask the question, why is that the case? So by the way, to just give out that second answer that I hear is that naturalistic Darwinian view that humanity has evolved, and as we've evolved a view of human value. And so that now we can see that we have human value clearer than we could say 1,000 years ago, and as we move forward, we're going to see it even more clearly.
So in that case, what is moral is whatever the most modern viewpoint is. Mm-hmm. Is that the case?
That's correct.
So when Jimmy Kimmel goes on stage at the Oscars and keeps saying humanity should be striving towards this and this and this, that is the highest moral at the Oscars?
Well, in some ways, he's saying that we're not as moral now as that we're going to become.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll be considered moral monsters by future generations. This is one of the questions that I have is, what do you say about those though who are the minorities who are arguing against the prevailing morality of the day? So Martin Luther King.
I know, right?
So is he a good guy or a bad guy now? Because if you believe that the present morality is the highest morality, then I'm wondering, well, those who fight against the present morality are doing what?
Well, and that's the ironic, claim of condemning slavery. Well, in the past, slavery would be totally fine then.
Right. So in those cultures where it was totally fine and that was the highest moral good of the day, you're saying now that it's not and they were wrong, but in their day they were right.
Well, and now what happens is, I hope...
So does morality shift like that, Andy? So my question, though, is in the mind of a secular humanist, is that the belief that morality just shifts with whatever the most recent...
It would evolve.
Yes, and in fact, Ian Bushfield, during the West Side dialogue, said, listen, but at the very end, he just said, listen, I'm a relativist. I think
but
it's...
not really.
But that's the irony, but not really.
Because Uganda doesn't have the right in their country to say what they want to say about homosexuality.
It is interesting how we impose this Western...
Or if North Carolina years ago wanted to pass a law about the use of bathrooms and transgender people, then all of us pull our, like the NBA and others don't want to have their businesses there or anything they're decried on social media as being bigoted.
And then what happens is, and I hope listeners are catching this, you're disintegrating the foundation from which inherent dignity can rest. And what happens is dignity now becomes relative.
Yeah.
Equality becomes relative. So, inalienable rights become relative.
So these were, from the Christian's perspective, dignity and inalienable.
Again, you had like a week to prepare.
I know.
And that's what you got.
Those are closely tied to God. Well, we would say.
Well, like absolutely.
Absolutely. So then...
because you have to ask, where did that value come from? And how is it that I came into the world with it? I didn't evolve this dignity. I have this dignity.
Yeah, because then there's that famous scene about Friedrich Nietzsche yelling, "God is dead."
Yes.
Right? Or does he write it in a book, or he runs into the town square?
Yeah, he wrote it in what's called the Gay Science.
The Madman is what...
Yeah, the Madman's the parable, and it's in the book, the Gay Science.
So in that, he runs in there, and a lot of people think, oh, Nietzsche's a villain because he's saying, oh, God is dead. But isn't he screaming, no, if we've killed God, there's no limit to the dehumanization and the unhumanity that we're going to see throughout the entire world, because now there's no moral compass.
Well, he first of all, it's important to note he wrote that to atheists, not to Christians, because he felt it was his atheist comrades that didn't understand the implications of their own worldview.
Yeah,
and basically he was saying that in a world, he wasn't saying that they had killed God, but they basically was saying that in a world in which God was no longer a foundation, you couldn't support things like meaning, purpose, or value.
Right.
And so he ultimately said, listen, the earth is untethered, right? Like we're, and if you read it, it's very poetic, right? We're just swirling around like we've lost ourselves. And ultimately then what he would say is, and in the Human Project, I bring up the story of Leopold and Loeb on this point, is that if that's the case, it means then that if somebody could rise above, which he would call an Übermensch, somebody that's like a superhuman, a Superman that could see that it's all meaningless, well, then they could just follow their pleasures and do as they like, and they're actually superior.
Adolf Hitler was that man.
Yeah.
No, listen, I'm not saying that he was a Superman and endorsing him. I'm saying that Nietzsche's theories, which were written around right before the turn of the 20th century, were actually picked up by
the Nazis.
Hitler, who actually saw, yeah, that's right. There's no judgment. We do what we want. We make movies, by the way, about this nowadays. What's interesting is the movies that we make, Groundhog Day is a good example of a film that's like that, that it's just, what happens if whatever you do today, you're going to wake up the next morning in the same bed. It's a kind of eternality. So the question then becomes, well, what should you do with that time? Now, in the end, in that movie, the guy learns that, you should give your life to philanthropy and doing really nice things. But there's another movie that's come out more recently, and by that I mean like 10 years ago or 8 years ago, No Country for Old Men.
Oh.
And No Country for Old Men is asking the same question. What happens if there's no God and there's a guy like this guy Anton Chigurh who goes around and just like shoots these air bullets into the heads of people? Mm-hmm. What do we say about him?
Well, and he does it at complete random.
Right.
The police officers in that show don't know what to do with him because he represents pure evil.
Well, and he does it, and he has conversations with people. One of the scenes that is really striking is that he's flipping a coin in front of it. He just stops in a gas station, and he goes, fills his car up with gas. He goes inside ready to kill this rural gas station attendant. And he says, I'm going to flip a coin, and if you get it wrong, I'm going to kill you, right? You live or die. And the guy's like, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't just flip a coin. And his comment is, but that's how you got here, right? And that's Darwinian naturalism says that actually the way that you got here was through chance mutation, right? You got here by the flip of a coin, by chance. So yes, of course I can do that. Why do you keep what he keeps saying? Why do people keep saying that? I can't do that, as if that there is such a thing as can or can't, or you should or shouldn't. There is none. And so the question that's being raised by the Coen brothers there is, okay, what about this? Here's an Übermensch. Here's a guy who's doing this. What do we say about him now? Can we call what he does evil? On what basis can we do so?
That's a great point, Jeff. And I like the way you frame that. Given this knowledge, what do you do? Well, Nietzsche would say, well, you follow your pleasure.
Right.
And then, and it's interesting because we see historical examples of people that, like Leopold and Loeb, who say, you know what my pleasure is? I'd like to steal a 14-year-old boy and kill him, which they did. And they said, I did it as a scientific experiment. I just wanted to know what it was like to kill somebody.
Right. Or if I want to use my power, I'm going to use it to oppress women and others. I'm going to use it in the Harvey Weinstein case. I'm going to use it to try to get as much sexual pleasure as I can. What's interesting about it, though, is that the very people who are espousing a secular humanism are the same people who are decrying Harvey Weinstein. Now, I think that's your point here, is that's hypocritical. Mm-hmm. You can't, on the one hand, be a relativist, right, and appeal to secular humanism, and on the other hand, say that Harvey Weinstein's actions are immoral. You have to have, and this is Nietzsche, you have to have a God to ground that. You have to have an authority. You have to have somebody who stands outside of all of these things, who doesn't change, who ends up saying, no, this is wrong.
And I would even go further. On the one hand, you're absolutely right. You need that as a foundation to even have such things as values. But then on the other hand, we need to be able to have a way of accounting for a human being as a moral agent as well. I mean, on a purely naturalistic worldview, you slip into just straight physicalism, where you have to ask the question, on what grounds then on that worldview are you even moral? And so that's why these topics are so important. I found this was interesting. With the Leopold and Loeb case, this was referred to as the crime of the century. And the reason that they called it the crime of the century is because their defense lawyer, Clarence Darrow, he just argued, hey, this is what they're being taught at the university.
Totally.
You know?
That's right. What do you expect them to do? You teach them a worldview, they go out and do it.
Yeah. And now you're going to hold them accountable for that?
So here's the thing, and this is me connecting dots that listeners might not want to connect. So in the United States over the last, 15, 20 years, there has been a slew of school shootings that are tragic and evil and all the things that we would say about them. Here's what's interesting to me, and the thing that's been puzzling me about this. For years, so people say the solution is gun control. Now, please believe me, I actually think there's probably some truth in that. But guns have been available in the United States for centuries. Okay, it was the Second Amendment, so you can buy a gun for a long time.
Yeah.
And school shootings did not happen. So the question isn't it isn't really about the guns, even though of course we should limit how people can use those guns. And gun control would be a great idea in many cases. The question is deeper than that. What is happening in American culture so that young men, and it is young men, what is happening to young boys who feel slighted in some way, that they think now that they should go into a school, shoot everybody up, and either kill themselves at the end or just go to jail because they don't have the courage in the end, to off themselves. So Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, who kind of started this modern thing in Columbine High School in 1999, they went in, shot everybody up dressed in like Matrix outfits, and then killed themselves in the end. The people who knew them ahead of time knew that they were steeped in this kind of thinking, that nothing really matters, that there is no God, there's no. So here's my point. What I'm frustrated with is that in the U.S. anyway, there seems to be this desire everyone recognizes this is evil. It's wicked. Our children shouldn't be able to go to school and die, right? Because one of their friends or their classmates decides he's going to bring a gun that day and start shooting everybody up. But we don't seem to want to address the worldview that's leading some of these young men to think that not just that this is okay, but there's no moral, what goes through your mind that says, the best thing for me to do after I shoot up my school is to shoot myself. That way I'll get out of any kind of judgment. Well, the answer is that's an atheistic world that you have. And where did they learn that? See, ideas have consequences in the end, and we're so shocked that somebody has actually believed these. We don't play these games in college classrooms only. We don't just do it. I mean, my point is that Nietzsche saw that and recognized, and he was okay with that.
Yep.
But I think he was like, the rest of you guys don't really see this yet, and you will see it. But we still are at a place in the West where we are not willing to face up to what we've done, and that by killing God, obviously we didn't kill him, but by killing God in our thinking, we have reaped the whirlwind. And as a result, this is one of the reasons I'm thankful for what you're doing at the Human Project, because you're trying to basically say, go back to the start and say, actually, here's the solution. We need to return to the way that God views people and the way the Bible talks about people.
Absolutely. And this is one of the reasons why it's important, as you bring up this event that started in 1999. We've got to look at our history if we're going to understand, how did we get here? And we can look throughout our history and see, a history of brokenness, a history of dehumanizing one another. And when we do that, we become capable of horrendous acts such as mass murder. And things such as slavery. Now, this might surprise some people, but if I could get in a time machine and I could go back and let's just say Hitler, for example. If I could talk to Hitler, or if I could talk with Pol Pot, or if I could talk with King Leopold II, I mean, you name the dictator that did horrible things. And I could ask them, don't you think it's wrong to kill people? their answer would most likely be, well, of course it's wrong to kill people. But then through a distorted perspective, they would explain to you that the Jews, that the Congolese, the Cambodian, the Cambodian educated, well, they're not actually people. Right? The same thing with slavery. If you could go back in time, they would say absolutely slavery is wrong. But those aren't people.
No, and you always say that people don't kill people, people kill
monsters, and monsters.
So my studies when I was in university veered into a lot of World War II history. And one of the things that I got really interested in, I remember writing several papers about it, was I was taking a debate class at the same time I was taking some World War II history classes, and I did a research paper on the images that were used by the Nazis of Jews, and the rat is the image that they vermin. Even the language that's used, if you read Mein Kampf, which I do not recommend you to read Mein Kampf, but if you read it, the language that's used is as a virus. They're parasite. They are a vermin. They are rats. They are this, and even the images that are used in the propaganda are that way. So if I can dehumanize you, I can treat you in a particular way, and
it's one of the reasons why the Nazis filmed what they did. I know a lot of people are like, "Why would you film that?" Well, because they saw themselves doing the world a favor.
Yeah, totally. These aren't real. These aren't people.
Yeah.
So, Andy, I'm going to apply this one. I mean, what some people are listening are thinking to themselves. I think. Well, I would be if I were in certain stages of my life. This is all well and good. It has to do with philosophy and world politics, and that's whatever. I want to suggest that actually we see dehumanizing actions in front of us. So here,
and we participate in that.
Absolutely. And me as guilty as anyone else. I'll give you one place. I watch a lot of basketball these days, and I've noticed there to be an approach to basketball now that is, it's not actually enough for me to beat you as a player. I have to shame you. I have to make you. There are words there. I have to make you into something that is beneath me, that I own, we use that language even. I owned you. And then I taunt you. It's not okay. So if I beat you off the dribble and I hit a jump shot, it's not that I made a good basketball play and I shot the ball and my skill was able to put it in the basket. It's I destroyed you, and I have to now talk to you about it, and I have to speak to you in ways to make it sound like you are owned by me. Some of the language, I sit on the court side from time to time, some of the stuff that these guys say to each other and are quite honestly dehumanizing.
And that's high school.
And
middle school.
But then we make YouTube videos about it, and we glory in that. So you broke his ankle. So it's a bigger deal now that if I break your ankles in basketball than if I actually score the points. Who cares if you score the points? You showed that guy as being completely beneath you as a person.
When we were filming the Human Project in Korea, we were in a taxi, and this taxi cab the driver didn't know what we were up to, but he was talking to Steve in Korean, and he said to Steve, he goes, the Korean people are losing their human kindness. That's a word in Korean. And Steve said, well, what do you mean by that? And the taxi driver said, we've been taught to view each other as competition. And it's interesting that goes with us even off the court. It happens in business. It happens all around us where you're now just competition to me. And exactly right. I no longer see you as a human being. I see you as competition that I need to destroy and have victory over.
And because that victory is going to give your life meaning.
Yeah. In some way, I'm going to try to find value in devaluing you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's just if there's a certain number of people in the game, you can either win by scoring more, or by making your opponent lose more, right? So if I can show that you're not up to my standard, verbally or otherwise, this is why we demean each other, right? Yeah. And this is why when we get really good and mad at each other, we start using. This is what racism comes from largely. Is that if I can show that your race is less, racial comments coming from people on sports fields and others. They get done for it, and people say, "Oh, you're a racist at heart." Probably, but a lot of times the racist comment is coming because the person felt like they were losing, or something was happening that was making them feel demeaned, and so they looked at something in the character or the person of the other person, and they want to point that out that makes you less, Andy. You're bald, Jeff. You're fat. You're like it just. We end up picking. This is my point, though. Is this dehumanizing? Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Right? And it's the way our minds think. And there needs to be a radical realtering around what we think is human and what people, inherently are worth.
And that's what I call the human project, in that we are the human project, and we need to constantly correct our dehumanizing perspectives of people. Yeah.
That's a nice way to close that off, Andy. I know you have to go.
I do.
But I want to ask one last question to you, Jeff.
Yes.
Sorry, guys. I got to take
Why in the world did we go back to, we did Sodom and Gomorrah before we did the other story?
Oh,
what happened there?
Out of nowhere.
I'm a little bit upset. I'm a little bit...
it was a last minute change is the answer to the question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we looked at the schedule and we realized that we were skipping over some important parts of the Abraham story, and it was just an oversight on our part when we did the planning for it. And if I had to do it over again, I would have actually done it in the order of what we did last week with Sarah laughing, and then I would have followed that with the story of
Sodom and Gomorrah.
No.
Oh.
I would have started with the story of Abraham talking God kind of down from judging Sodom and Gomorrah. And then we would have done the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then we would have done what we're doing this next week, and then we would have done Genesis 22. So we inadvertently chose some passages and left others out that were not. This is totally my fault. Like I said, if I do it over again, I would have. We've done most of the texts that we wanted to do, except for one, or we'll have done the ones we wanted to do, except for one.
So that one's a little bit of a backstory then, kind of like a prequel.
Yeah, so in the end, that was sort of the way we wanted to sell it, and I didn't make mention of it because it was like, whatever.
Yeah, but those guests, the two visitors who leave...
Yeah, the same guys.
Are the same guys who go to Sodom and Gomorrah.
We go to Sodom, yeah. Great. And actually, what's interesting about those stories is if you look at the hospitality that was shown to Abraham, shown by Abraham to these guys...
Compared to Lot?
Compared to the hospitality Lot shows... or the hospitality that the men of Sodom show, you're supposed to look at it and think, holy smokes, Sodom is a really bad place.
Yeah, Lot's kind of a mess.
Yeah, and that the whole thing is a mess. And so, the passage that we studied this last week serves kind of as a foil. It highlights, in other words, the sin of Sodom and their inhospitality and the way that they wanted to treat these men. Whereas Abraham, when he received them, did what was not only expected but was righteous. Yeah. And that was by giving significant, giving himself to them and making sure that they had the best of everything. And yeah. So it's interesting if you read it together. Yeah. This next week we're going to be covering a bit of a larger section. We were planning just on doing the fulfillment of the promise in Genesis 21, the fulfillment of the promise to the child. But we're also going to include Genesis 20 in that, which is this story that sounds like it sounds like you already read it, because Abraham goes and he talks about his wife as his sister again. And she gets taken by the king of the land.
So didn't learn his lesson the first time.
It's an interesting story because, in the end, it shows that this guy keeps making the same errors, and yet ultimately God fulfills the promise to him nevertheless, which is, of course, a great picture of what we deserve and the grace God shows in continuing to strive with us.
And how we operate, because we will make the same
over and over again, and yet the Lord continues to strive with us. So it'd be a good weekend, I think. You'll be encouraged if you come along to hear about the grace of God.
Good. Well, you answered that question.
I did.
Thanks, Jeff.
That one, I hit that one to deep right field. You know what I mean? That one went in the stands.
You know what? Most guys could turn that out of a triple, but you, Jeff, probably maybe a double.
No.
Maybe a double.
No, that ball's over the fence.
No, it hit the fence, it dropped, and you got to second base. Where you were stranded. Baseball season's coming, isn't it?
It is. Excited about the baseball season.
Oh, man.
Another year of watching the Mariners lose poorly. So, that's good.
Well, amen to that. Jeff, great to have you back on
buddy.
the program. We're just so thankful that you would join us today and that, you didn't just ditch us again like usual.
Yep, we'll try to make a habit of it. Thanks, Daniel.
Wait, a habit of which one? Being here.
Yeah, one of them. Yeah.
Awesome. Will you be here next week?
I think so, yeah.
Can you guarantee
this is dying now.
Can you guarantee
I hope
it,
the music's
Jeff?
been playing. I hope the music's been playing.